Welcome to the Broncos Source Podcast.
This is the Broncos Source Podcast. Hello, welcome to the podcast. My name is Steven. Right with me is my co-host, Adam Mez, and then with us is our second co-host, Sean. Guys, how you doing? First off, Adam, good to see you, and we'll talk about that Chiefs game. So, Adam, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had some days, some
Yeah.
moment to breathe and decompress from that game. But life and work have been stressful, so it's good to be on the podcast, just
Yeah,
talking football with the boys. So
yeah, for sure. Sean?
Yeah, I'm not yelling at my TV anymore when you get a field goal block, so that's a plus, right?
uh, yeah. So let's get into it, shall we? And tonight
yeah,
we're gonna again for most of those who are watching or listening, you guys already know what happened. We're gonna keep it short for you all, and we're gonna kind of share what you guys are thinking and whether you're watching or listening. So, as most of us, we were heading into this game. We were coming off of a horrible loss against the Ravens. We weren't much hopeful against the Chiefs. They were undefeated, but we knew that the Broncos were going to have a competitive game against Kansas City as they always do. And out of the gate, the Broncos started well. I mean, they got a touchdown pass to Vele, who I love. I think he definitely deserves playing time over Humphrey. Humphrey did have a nice catch in the game, but I really like Vele. Very, very high on him. He was a draft pick this year. Him and Bo Nix, I think they have a good composition with each other, but he got that touchdown, his first career touchdown. So congrats to him for Vele. And then, the Broncos, they were in control of this entire game. First half, they were in control. The defense was getting to Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes, he was doing Mahomes stuff and making all this wizardry throws and, getting out of the pocket. And the Broncos defense, I mean, they were excellent on Sunday. I mean, hats off. Clap for them, whatever you want to do, but they did a heck of a job. And then, going to the second half, the Broncos, they were up by, I believe, 14-7, something like that. And so your only hope is to have the defense still do their job, don't have a meltdown. And ultimately, the Chiefs, they were, getting some of these field goals. It was kind of a back and forth. And the Chiefs, they were just settling for field goals, which is, in the Broncos case, best case scenario, right? And, you'll take those, right? So, it goes down to 14-13, and then the Chiefs, they get the ball. Broncos offense can't do much. A lot of sacks for the Chiefs, in that game. Just Bo Nix was getting obliterated. I mean, their defensive line for the Chiefs is arguably the best in the NFL, right? And the Chiefs, they get the ball, they go down the field, get a field goal. So now 16-4. And ultimately it goes down to the fourth quarter, final 5 minutes of the game, 5-6 minutes of the game, and you basically tell yourself, Broncos got to score here or the game over, right? The Chiefs are going to end it if they get the ball back and we don't score. So with 5-6 minutes left on the clock, Broncos move the ball slowly but efficiently. Bo Nix does an incredible job. Broncos take their time as they should have. They did an excellent job. Go down to, I believe, the 30-yard line, right? Roughly right on the 25, 30-yard line. And Broncos run the clock down, go to Will Lutz, and who has been excellent this year. The Broncos have had no issues with field goals this year from him. He's done an excellent job. And I remember I was actually in a restaurant. We were eating lunch, and I just had a gut feeling. I was like, okay, this is going to be a game winner. We're going to win the game. But there was also a feeling going back to last year's game against Buffalo, to where, remember the 12 men on defense for the Bills, but if you remember that kick, Will Lutz missed it. And that was actually not I think it was roughly around the same length of a field goal, right? It was like, pretty much a give me field goal, and he missed it. So with the crowd noise, I got really nervous, and he goes for the kick and it's blocked. And I was like, of course it's blocked. And I just remember putting my face to my head. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And it was just like, it was a soul crusher. It was a gut punch for me and for everyone else. But I mean, are we surprised? But at the same time, though, if you look at the video, horrible job by the Broncos. But at the same time, though, I mean, it's the Chiefs. They have great players, but it just Forsyth, he got overpowered very much, like he's been very much of the season, especially over the last few weeks. He got overpowered against the Saints. There's videotape on that on Twitter. But yeah, it was just a gut punch, and it was just like, man, the Broncos, they could have won this game. Bad play, bad officiating in that game all around, but still, it's a game the Broncos should have had. So I'll hand it off to Adam first. But all I can say, it was a gut punch. But great job by Bo Nix and the Broncos to nearly beat the Chiefs, undefeated Chiefs.
Yeah, so it was a gut punch. I was sitting here watching the game by myself, and I did not expect the field goal to get blocked, and I kind of just sat there in shock. At first I didn't realize what had happened, or I didn't think that it was real. So it took a moment for me to process. But we move on. We move on towards the next game, and we move on to the Falcons, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But one thing that we're talking about entirely too much as Bronco fans, and I think I texted Sean about this, is we're looking at Broncos and Chiefs games on this large scale of the last 18 games in which we've only won one time. We need to stop doing that, because this team that we have right now, this team is 0-1 against the Chiefs. Okay. And they didn't get blown out. They played a phenomenal game. And if we just look at it as a scope of one game, it's just one game instead of the last 18 games where they've owned us. I think it's a lot better to accept that, it's one game and you're either going to win or you're going to lose one of those games, right? Like, that's what happens. And so I think there's a lot of positives that come out of this game, Steven and Sean. Like, I think the Denver Broncos showed the world that they are a mismatch for the Kansas City Chiefs. And if the Chiefs draw the Broncos somehow in the playoffs, they're not going to enjoy it. And I think the Broncos will have a great chance to make some noise in that game. I think our defense is absolutely outstanding. I think looking back on the Ravens game now, we're talking about just a mismatch, right? The Ravens are a different kind of beast on offense that the Broncos can't really match up with very well. But all around the NFL, I think the Broncos match up very well with other defenses. Because the thing with other offenses, the thing with the Broncos defense is they blitz a lot. And when you blitz Lamar Jackson, you get burned. If you don't blitz Lamar Jackson, you get burned. If you play man, you get burned. If you play zone, you get burned. There's no stopping that guy. He can only beat himself, really, in my opinion. But when you play Patrick Mahomes, especially this year, he doesn't handle the blitz very well. And he didn't against the Broncos. And I think our defense was absolutely outstanding. Steven, to your point earlier, 1 out of their last 12 in the red zone against the Broncos, spanning across, I think, 3 games. Mm-hmm. The 2 games last year and the game this year, they've scored 1 touchdown against the Broncos in the red zone in 12 trips. That's absolutely unheard of against the Chiefs. I think the Broncos in the future are going to be the biggest problem for the Chiefs in this division. And let me tell you something, as I guess, Bo Nix hater so far into this season, he was absolutely outstanding in this game against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
It felt like every time he dropped back that he was going to throw a dime. Like, he was just going to get it done. Mm-hmm. And there were 2 plays, and they talked about it on the broadcast. The 3rd and 1, where Sean Payton trusts him to go over the top and go for a touchdown. Dude, that is maturation and growth within the offense, because you're not doing that week 1. But when he's now getting himself acclimated with this offense very well, and I think he played almost flawlessly against an outstanding defense in the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead, by the way.
Yeah.
And there was a play at the end of the game that we all thought won the game for us, that rollout to the right, and then he climbs the pocket and throws a strike on 3rd down. I mean, if you don't think that is elite quarterback play for a rookie in that environment against that team, that's just an outstanding play. there were a couple times when he ran backwards when he was getting rushed that drove me absolutely insane. I'm like, what are we doing here? But overall, he was great. And I think the Broncos, there were some reasons that they lost, because the offense kind of fell asleep for 2.5 quarters after they went up 14-3, or a quarter and a half, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they lost the game, because they didn't put up any points in that time period. But they still played really good. I think the defense did everything that we would want them to do. And one last thing, I'm not a refs guy at all, but the Chiefs wouldn't even have scored a touchdown without that illegal contact, a bogus illegal contact penalty, when the Broncos sacked Mahomes and took him out of field goal range. So, I think there's nothing but positives to come out of it. If we stop thinking about it in terms of the Chiefs owning us and just think of it in terms of one game, I think there's nothing but positive things to say, Sean.
Yeah, and maybe piggybacking on that, we're talking about arguably the worst stretch in Broncos history against what may go down as the best quarterback of all time. And if not him, he's probably going to be in the top 5 conversation or whatever it may be. So you put those two things together, yeah, you're going to go 1-12, 1-13 against a team when you're constantly changing quarterbacks and you're constantly changing coaches. But that's over now. And we are kind of on the precipice or the horizon of, we've got money that's about to be coming in that we can spend. We have a quarterback that's potentially proving that he is the guy. And there's pieces on this team that maybe the national media don't know. But to Steven's point, these are Pro Bowl guys. These are dudes putting up numbers that all the other teams' fan bases have no idea who these guys are. So, and they're going out there and they're going week in and week out. And they're getting sacks. They're getting quarterback pressures between Zach Allen and Benito, and now Cooper obviously getting paid, and rightfully so. That's kind of where we are now. And, with a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, we really have a chance to turn the tides. And to your point, with the last 3 games, and even when we were a bad team, we played the Chiefs well, and I think we alluded to that. So from my standpoint, I mean, you look at the Will Lutz field goal that he kicked short. We got a 5-yard penalty right before that. You don't get that penalty. Let's just say the kick's the same. That's 3 more points there. There's little things we can nitpick it, but at the end of the day, the receivers were fantastic between Vele, Sutton, Troutman played great. Estime's debut, if you will, as kind of more of the workhorse back, was, I guess, as most would expect. And outside of the injury concerns, what everybody really thought he'd be coming out of Notre Dame. So, if all those things continue to click, it's the big bad Chiefs, whatever. But like you said, if it comes to the playoffs, if we get through the first round, we're going to see each other again. And they're going to likely be the 1 seed. We're going to be the 6 or 7 seed. If you're able to knock off whether it be Pittsburgh or Buffalo, if you're able to get through that game, you're going to make them put their money where their mouth is and see if they're really a 3-peat team, or if I feel like they're more of a 6-3 team based this year, and they've been escaping teams more so than beating teams. And I mean, that's a recipe for disaster through all of NFL history. If you're just squeaking by and getting through when it comes time and it's crunch time and it's time to be the playoffs, you're not going to get so lucky.
Yeah, and I think too, one of your points, Sean, you just reminded me, if Cortland Sutton doesn't drop that absolute dime from Bo Nix on 3rd down before the half, I mean, that's another 3 points right there. You know what I mean? So I think what we just need to attribute this to, Steven and Sean, is it's their time right now, and things are just going right for them. And I'm a big believer in whatever is supposed to happen is going to happen, regardless of what we want to happen. And I just think that the Chiefs, it's just their time, man, and it's not our time, and that's why we didn't win this game. And that's okay, because our time's coming. It's very apparent, right, from the fact that how well we played in this game, that the Broncos are coming. And if it's not this year, it'll definitely be next year. And you better believe that Kansas City is very well aware that the Broncos are a problem for them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And you allude to Sutton. I mean, that pass from Nix to Sutton was just a well-placed ball. I mean, that was probably the best throw Nix has had the entire season to a wide receiver for a touchdown, because a lot of those balls were either early in the season, even going to, the last previous weeks, they were either overthrown or too high or maybe too low, right? Kind of all of the above, right? But that was just a dime to Sutton. That was just so beautiful. And I think every single Broncos fan just was like, great throw by Bo. Yeah, he looks a lot better. And not to mention, um, you know, I mean, the Broncos recovered it, but I think Bo fumbled early in the game, but that was like his first fumble since like his college days in Auburn, which is
Yeah.
incredible. You don't hear
He
that
said like
very
38
often.
games, I think.
Right, yeah, 38 games, man. So it's incredible. Bo Nix, he holds the ball very well. And as Kurt Benkert, who is a former NFL backup,
Love that
he
guy.
he's so great, man. And anyways, this was a few weeks ago, and actually it might have been even more than that. This was early in the season, but he said something along the lines of, Broncos fans, do not worry. Bo Nix, he's going to be a very good quarterback for you all. So I'm excited for Bo Nix. Again, there's going to be growing pains, and I'm so happy the Broncos, you know, didn't bench him. Like there's rumors about Chicago already potentially benching Caleb Williams, which is just horrible idea in my opinion. But I don't know. We'll see. But like Peyton Manning said at the start of the season on a podcast, I forget where, but he said that coaches should play rookie quarterbacks, not bench him after 3 weeks. You should just go all in and see what the quarterback has. But Bo Nix, he has the stuff, he has the talent to be a very good quarterback, and we saw a lot of that, on Sunday. And I think even though the loss, despite the offense was poor, I think the Broncos had arguably one of their best games of the year, if not their best game of the year, in terms of offense and just efficiency. And Bo Nix, his QB rating is each week is going up, right? And he had 2 touchdown passes. And yeah, so again, even though the loss was a tough one, there are things like every single week we can say, hey, this looks good. This is looking better. And there's still some areas like, you know, um, Adam alluded to. There's still some things that Bo could definitely still work on, but definitely ball placement has been a lot better over the last few weeks, especially in this past game against the Chiefs. So that's something to keep your hat on for as we head into the last stretch of the season. Again, we have, I believe, 6, 7, 8, whatever weeks left. I think now it's 7, right? Roughly 7 weeks left.
7 games,
So,
8 weeks.
7 games, yeah.
Yeah.
So really, my hope with the Broncos is to have at least a 500 record or 500, because if the Broncos just win half those games, you're making the playoffs potentially. I mean, we were talking about this before we started the show tonight, but the Broncos are in position to make the playoffs. And again, this is a conversation for another time, and maybe we'll do a post or a poll on Instagram about this. But can the Broncos make the playoffs this year? And I think there's definitely a world where they do make the playoffs. I think the chances are still very high, because again, you're looking at all the other teams in the FC. They're not really good, man. And there's the open door. There's an opportunity to where the Broncos can capitalize on these other teams not doing so well this year. The Texans, they're not going to looking at so strong as they were last year. The Bengals, they're kind of right with the Broncos in terms of record, right? So there's a lot of these teams that are going to be trying to push for those last place wildcard spots. And at this point, the Broncos are just trying to get in. And if we get in, great. And especially like we mentioned last week and the last few weeks, this is going to be a huge thing for Broncos fans and Broncos country if the Broncos make the playoffs, and really essentially their first year of the rebuild, because last year they still had Russell Wilson. We still had many of the, veteran players on this team. And then, really they cut bait with a lot of key players, Justin Simmons, who we're going to be playing on Sunday, against on Sunday. And, Russ, we traded, Baron Browning to Arizona, which I thought was a good trade. It was a good trade getting some draft capital from that. But I mean, again, this is going to be a huge W for a lot of Broncos fans to make the playoffs. And in Bo's rookie season, I mean, imagine that, right? So it just goes to show you how high this ceiling can be for Broncos fans. And again, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to have weird games for the probably before the season ends, but there's a chance here, and it's going to be so awesome if the Broncos can make the playoffs, which I think is definitely. I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to see it. It's just that we got to get over these trap games, especially against the Raiders and even the Chargers too. But I think those are definitely games that I think that we're going to do well in. So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, our next 4 games, we should go 4-0 if you're just looking at it on paper. I mean, the Falcons are really tough, but their defense is not very good, so they can be had. But then you've got at the Raiders, you're home on Monday night against the Browns, and then you're home against the Colts. Like, I mean, those are 4 games before you go to the Chargers, which is probably going to be either for a playoff spot or for that second wild card, right? That's what that game's going to look like. That game will, you could be looking at that one getting flexed to maybe a Sunday night or something like that. It's going to be an important game. But I think if the Broncos can get past the Falcons, which we're going to talk about here shortly, right? Those next 3 games, I mean, you got to win those games.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Steven, keeping in mind, like you said, this is a rebuild. Like, this isn't, we're not perennial contenders right now. You know what I mean? So, like, if they somehow stumble against the Browns or the Colts or the Raiders, it's not the end of the world. I mean, they're a better team than those 3 teams, but I think that we can't sit here and say, well, you guys are expected to win these games, because they're not there yet. You know, like, I think on paper they're going to win those games, but I think it's going to be really tough. But I do think the Broncos will get into the playoffs for sure. So,
well, and based on what you're saying with that schedule, I mean, we're going to be favored in a lot of those games based on how they've been playing, which is when was the last time we could say that? Half the time we are dogs at home. You know what I mean? So, and if we're going to talk about the playoffs, you control your own destiny right now. You're
100%.
in if the playoffs started today, and that's all you can ask for. If you go out there and handle your business starting this week with the Falcons, and I do believe we'll win that game. I mean, that division is all over the place. I mean, they lose to the Saints, who we just, drug out the door. Who knows who their quarterback was going to be? Is the Carr's back? They got all that drama down there. They fired their coach. I think they honestly just played better than the Falcons this past week, because you get that boost, you fire the coach, somebody comes in, you get that 1-2 game boost, and then they crash back down. So I think the Falcons are a better team than the Saints are, but it shows. And I think when they played the Panthers, that was a close game too, and the Panthers are garbage. So, as good as the Falcons are, they've let teams that have no business playing with them hang around. And we're not those teams. We're a team capable of beating the Falcons. They have a good offense. They lack on defense. You play offense like you've been playing, and our defense outside of the Ravens game plays solid offenses very well. So I honestly think as a home game, we're going to win this game. And then to your point, Adam, when you follow that with Raiders, Browns, and Colts, I mean, as long as you've got your head on right, I mean, I don't want to look too far ahead, but I mean,
they're going to win those. They got to win those games.
You're talking about a 5th seed. You're talking depending on how these other teams play. So, I think we're going to make it. We control our own destiny, and we've got a favorable schedule while we're playing our best football, and we still have our bye too. We're
true.
We're relatively healthy, and we have a bye. So I think there's a lot of things in our favor, and I'm excited to see what this back half looks like.
For sure, yeah. Going into the Falcons game as we wrap the show tonight, as Sean was alluding to, I mean, the defense. I mean, if the Broncos can do that to the Chiefs, I mean, you can do that to the Falcons, right? To any other team in football. I mean, the Chiefs are, undefeated, right?
Just not the Ravens.
Just not the Ravens.
We got to get out of that 7 seed, man, because we don't want that.
We don't want the Ravens, right? And we would rather face the Steelers, the Bills, even, as I alluded to before the podcast. I'd be more than happy to play the Bills, in Buffalo. I mean, we beat them last year with Russell Wilson as a quarterback, and and that was an ugly game. And I feel like our Broncos team is better than what it was last year, especially with the quarterback that we have, and our defense is definitely better than it was last year, in my opinion. And of course, the second half of last year, we kind of saw what we've been seeing this year from our defense. But I mean, the Broncos are facing up the Falcons offense, which has been good, but if the Broncos can shut down these offenses like we've seen, this is definitely a W for the Broncos. And it's not like the Falcons offense is like Lamar Jackson's. There's no way it matches up with that. So I completely agree. The Broncos defense alone, I think, has already sealed the win for the Broncos. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, but I think if Bo Nix can still improve, and especially if you're playing against a horrible, defense or a pretty bad defense, I think as long as Bo does his stuff and kind of do what we saw in the Chiefs game and even to the Panthers game before that, even though it was the Panthers. But if we can see that, the Broncos easily have the game in the bag. And I think over the next 4 weeks are critical. And at this point, again, we could talk about the Chiefs, game, that would have helped their chances. But like you guys have been saying, the Broncos control their destiny at this point, and it's an opportunity. They shouldn't be afraid of it. They should embrace the opportunity, right? And yes, like I said, this is a rebuild, but even if they don't make the playoffs, right? Let's just say that there's a world where they don't. They don't have to hang their head and say, "Oh, we are a horrible franchise." No, I mean nobody was really expecting this team to be the playoffs or to be in the contention. People had this team winning only 5 games this year, and this team could definitely potentially win 9 or 10 easily,
Mm-hmm.
9 or 10 easily. In my book, I had the Broncos winning only 9 games this year. That was the highest, and this team could potentially win 10. Right, so there's a lot to look forward to. But for Sunday, to look ahead to that game, I think the Broncos are going to win. Again, we'll do our predictions. We'll post that later. But I had the Broncos winning that game. I think the key is Broncos defense show up, and that's really basically it. Because again, the offense, of course, has to score points, but as long as the defense still does this thing, the Broncos have this game in the bag, in my opinion. So I'll hand it off to Adam here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people disrespect Kirk Cousins, and I'm not saying you did, but I think a lot of people tend to forget how good this guy is. And historically, he's been very, very good against the blitz in his entire career, and he's arguably one of the best play action quarterbacks in this era. And so the Broncos, it's going to be an interesting matchup with how much the Broncos blitz against Kirk Cousins. I'll be interested to see how you do that. If you sit back in zone against Kirk Cousins, he can pick you apart. He's a great quarterback. And their offense has a lot of things that present problems for the Broncos. Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, these are all very talented players on offense. I think our defense is outstanding. I'm not worried about it. I just they practice too, like what they say, right? The Falcons practice too. So I think it's going to be a really good game. I think what it'll come down to is if the Broncos can take advantage of that bottom 10 passing defense that the Falcons have. They're not very good defensively at all. And like you said, they've had games with teams like Carolina. We smoked those guys, and they barely got out of Carolina with a win, and then they go to and lose to New Orleans, who half the team's on IR. It's a weird business, the NFL. I do think the Broncos being at home is a huge, huge deal here. But I think the Broncos are probably treating this like a playoff game, to be honest with you, for the rest of the season. Why would they not? I do think, to your point, Steven, that let's just say the worst of the worst happens and the Broncos lose this week and next week, right? They're still going to be in playoff contention because the AFC wild card is so bad. Like, depending on what the Bengals do, even if the Bengals won the next two and you lost the next two, you'd still be, one game out? And you still get the Bengals. So, I don't think they're going to lose either of these games. But I'm saying the Broncos are firmly in this playoff race. They understand that every game from here on is super important. And honestly, as gut-wrenching of a loss as that was to Kansas City, it had to have given them confidence that they can just go out there and beat anybody for the rest of the season, Sean.
Yeah, and I think, to the players that you were kind of alluding to, PS2 takes Drake London away. So as long as you focus on Bijan Robinson and, Kyle Pitts either has 200 yards or he has one catch. He never seems to be anywhere in between. I don't know what his usage with that dude or, why he can't seem to get going when he's, from a
Super
fantasy
talented
perspective or a draft perspective, people are always, they're so high on this guy and he's just not doing it. I think when you have the best corner in football and you're good against the run and you have such a high quarterback pressure rate, I think we're going to cause them problems. You know how loud it's going to be. The fans are going to be excited, especially coming off of that game. I think they're going to be amped up and ready to get this win that we need. We don't want to go below 500. This is a game that's, while not a must win, it's one of those games where this is going to set the tone for the back half. You're 5-5. The season starts now. You have to be in the plus side if you want to be a playoff team, if you want to whatever it is that your goals and aspirations are as a football team, it starts on Sunday, and I think they're going to come out. I think they're going. I think this is going to be maybe not their biggest win, but I think this is going to be like a 2-score style win for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the only concern I have is the Ravens, not the Ravens, the Falcons offense, because again, Adam alluded to, Kirk Cousins, knowing the blitz and everything and having good history against the blitz. My concern is the Broncos go with the blitz and he reads it very well and just has an excellent offensive game. That's my worst fear. But again, I still believe in the Broncos defense. They were able to, if they can overcome Patrick Mahomes and, just obliterate him. And, I think they can do it with the Falcons, surely. Right. And if we don't, we'll definitely be disappointed. But hey, I mean, it's a rebuild year, but you have to get this win against the Falcons. You have to. No buts or ifs, right? So
yeah, I
hopefully we
think
can do that. Yeah.
When you're just the better football team,
Yeah.
regardless of if you're rebuilding or not, you should
gotta
win these games, especially at home. But yeah, I mean, Broncos country, we should be excited, man. This is fun. Like, we're relevant again. Being 5-5 is whatever, but like, we're in the playoff race. We could be 3-7, and if we're in the playoff race, we're in the playoff race. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's time to embrace this. I'm fully on board with Bo Nix now after his last 2 games. In those environments, he has looked outstanding. I think it's more a product of just not having the right weapons around him yet. But with Sean Payton and his killer instinct and how bad he wants to win, I'm not worried about that. The Broncos will go out and do what they need to do. But, get out to Mile High, support the team, be loud. If you're in the South Stands, stop sitting down in the South Stands. Get up, please. Make noise. If you're not there to make noise, just don't. Just give your ticket to somebody else. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like this culture that we have in Denver now, where people are reporting each other and getting mad because you're standing. It's a football game, man. Like, if you don't want to watch a football game, then stay home. Yeah. Because the Broncos need us, and we need that home field advantage back. Because I believe the Broncos are 2 games under 500 over the last 8 seasons or something like that. There hasn't been much of a home field advantage, but you're looking at the Falcons game. You're looking at the Chiefs in the last week of the season, and you're looking at the Browns on Monday Night Football. The Broncos need us to be there and supporting them, and just getting behind this team. And I think the last thing I would say, Steven, is enjoy the journey, man, because this is right now we're that underdog and we're not expected to do anything, and then it progresses, right? Then it's like, okay, now we're playoff contenders, and then it progresses. Okay, now you have Super Bowl expectations. You know what I mean? So we're on the first level right now. So let's enjoy it for where we're at. With this roster, what Sean Payton's doing is absolutely, outstanding, to be honest with you. Absolutely. So, and this is coming from somebody who hasn't always praised Sean Payton or Bo Nix, but the way they've played the last 2 games, and I know they got blown out in Baltimore, but that first half could have been anybody's. You know what I mean? The way they played, the way they've shown up, the way they've started games lately, I think Sean Payton has completely changed the culture here. And one of these days, we're going to hand the Chiefs an even worse, heartbreaking loss than the one that they gave us. So lots of stuff to look forward to for us.
I'm looking forward to that Kansas City loss one day. It's going to happen.
The playoffs this year to kill that.
There you go.
Oh, man. Let me tell you, if the Broncos are going into Kansas City and they're undefeated, and that's
already a top 5 Broncos playoff game in history.
Oh, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Not even.
That puts. Yeah, I know, Adam. You hate the Elway Bo Nix comparisons on every telecast.
I do.
But
I do.
You take that game up in Kansas City and you put yourself in the AFC Championship game. There's going to be I don't want to say justifiably so, because John Elway did amazing things for the state of Colorado and the Broncos franchise, but you beat the Chiefs, kill their 3-peat, and go to the AFC Championship in your rookie year. People are going to talk about you for a long time.
Well, and I think
my veins, man. Inject that in my veins.
I think the Broncos have the defense that can carry them not only to the playoffs, but deep into the playoffs as well. Yeah, as long as they don't see the Ravens again, because that was bad. That's a mismatch for the Broncos. And that's fine. Sometimes that happens. But if they get the Chiefs or the Bills or the Steelers, I think the Broncos can beat any of those teams.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
let's
Yeah.
get this one this weekend.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Starts
Let's
today.
go.
Starts this
Let's
Sunday.
go.
So, folks, thank you for tuning in to this episode. And we hope if you're going to the game, again, like Adam said, please cheer, please stand up, don't sit down. Because, again, there was that game against Carolina. I know it was Carolina,
Weak.
but
It was weak.
like there was a view of a camera shot. Thank you, CBS, for getting that. But it was like nobody was cheering. Nobody was just sitting down there drinking, whatever. I'm like,
It was
it's
third down.
third down, and
Get
like,
up.
yeah, it's just like start yelling, start doing whatever, and it's just like show up, go to the Broncos game on Sunday if you can. If you are, great, cheer. Just don't sit down and start yapping about how your week went. Start yelling your lungs out. You got a week for it to recover, right? I mean, this is a huge game, right? So against the Falcons, I mean, again, like Adam alluded to, at this point, almost every single game, the rest of the way, is a playoff game. You gotta win these big ones, right? So have fun on Sunday. If you're watching at home, again, cheer for your Broncos, wear your Broncos colors, wear your Broncos jersey like I will be doing. And we should have a fun game on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, our predictions should be coming soon, hopefully before Sunday. I'm looking forward to it. Sean, Adam, and myself would like to thank you for watching this edition of the Broncos Source podcast. This version should be out tomorrow. We're excited for what we have on Sunday against the Falcons. Again, thank you for watching. And as always, Broncos country.
Go
Go
Broncos.
Broncos. Let's go.